All right, so we're going to run through the algebra here now. I'm going to go ahead and solve for I1 using equation 1, right? I'm going to go ahead and solve for I1, and then once I get an expression for I1, I can plug that into this equation. I'll have this equation in terms of just I2, and then I can solve for I2. And then from there, we can go back and substitute into our expression for I1. So let me just rewrite equation 1 again. Here, I'm going to write it as V1 minus I1 times R2. Then I have another I1 term here, minus I1 times R1, and then I'll write minus I2 times R2 equals 0. I can obviously group my I1 terms now. I get minus R1 plus R2 here. That's going to be minus I2 R2 equals 0, and then I can write V1 minus I2 R2, all that divided by R1 plus R2 is going to give me I1, right? I basically moved this term over to the other side and then divided both sides by R1 over R2, and this is what I'm left with. So this is my expression here for I1. Okay, now that we need to take this expression, plug it in for I1 right here, and then we can solve this expression because all that expression will be in terms of is known values and I2, so we can solve for I2. Okay, so we're running out of room here, but let's just grab the algebra we've done so far. I guess all we need is really this. And we'll take it on over to the next page and just continue the algebra. Okay, so let's do that. Let me shrink this a little bit as well. Okay, so we got this expression for I1 here. Let's just do that. And we want to basically take it and plug it into I1 in our equation 2. So let me write out equation 2 now. It's going to be V2 minus I2 minus IS times R3 minus, and now I have my I1 term, which is this, right? So let me just take that. That's I1, right? And then I need to write plus I2 times R2. And that whole thing is equal to 0. Okay? So now from here, I basically need to just distribute out these terms. And so we're going to have V2, wrote that a little bit low, V2, then I've got a minus I2 times R3, then I've got a plus IS times R3, and then I'm going to have a minus V1 times R2 over R1 plus R2, and then I'm going to have a plus I2 R2 squared over R1 plus R2, and then I'm going to have a minus I2 R2 equals 0, right? Let me make sure that's right. That looks good to me. Okay, and so now the last thing I want to do is I want to group all of my R2 terms, or my I2 terms, sorry, because I want to get all the I2s by themselves. So let's write, let's basically write V2 plus IS times R3. And then my last term that doesn't have an I2 is this one, so minus V1 times R2 over R1 plus R2, right? And then that's going to be equal to, and I'll put this on the other side, all my I2 terms. So my first I2 term is going to be I2 times R3, right? Then I'm going to have a plus I2 times R2, and then I'm going to have a minus I2 times R2 squared, and then that whole thing is going to be divided by R1 plus R2, right? Okay, so this is my equation, and I can actually just pull an I2 out of all three of these terms, and then I can go ahead and solve for I2. Okay, so let's, I don't know if this video's gotten a little bit too long just yet, but let me shrink some of this so that I can make room for one more step here. Okay, that should be good. And so here I basically want to write that V2 plus IS times R3 minus V1 R2 over R1 plus R2 is equal to I2 times R2 plus R3 minus R2 squared over R1 plus R2. Okay, so I've got this big, ugly expression. I guess it's not quite finished yet until I do this. I2 is going to be equal to, and let me move this over, and I'll give myself a little denominator bar. In the numerator, I'm going to have V2 plus IS times R3 minus V1 R2 over R1 plus R2. And then in the denominator, I'm going to have R2 plus R3 minus R2 squared over R1 plus R2. All right, and so that is my expression for I2. Of course, I can go ahead and grab my values from here and just paste them on this page so that I have them. And we can plug in all these values now and solve for I2, okay? So I'm going to end this video here. But that's going to be our next step. We're basically going to plug in all these values, get a value for I2, and then we will substitute that value for I2 back into our expression for I1, and we can solve for I1. We already know I3, and then we can go ahead and solve for our voltages. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and end this video right here.